all lies will be exposed. That's all. And anyone who takes that the wrong way know why they take it the wrong way. The truth is the light.
I need to have another one of these.
Amen, amen.
Gee. I kind of.
This is way over the edge. Like we it's not even over the edge. We died already.
This is beyond the event horizon. Like we about to hit the vortex.
Yeah, we about to hit the vortex.
Yeah.
Boy, you looking like a milk dud. Nigga thought he was Michael Jordan. Boy, you looking like Blank Man. Boy, you looking like Lil Bill.
How you die does not redeem how you lived. You do not become a hero in your death when you are a weapon of the enemy in your life.
Well, negotiations, right? Politics.
And we're out of time. So you.
Hey, all gravity. Any day above ground, live it.
I'm back.
All right. So, as promised, I finally got to go in on Chad O. Jackson. Now, I've done it before, but I don't know what this dude's problem is. You would think that he's like a long lost member of the King family that doesn't get recognized. I don't know. But he been outside. He for months saying something about MLK. He a fraud. MLK this. And I'm like, dude, all your talking points you got from the FBI, which has even debunked themselves. You run into Whitlock to go debate people, then you went somewhere else to debate the dude on the left who I did say, for full disclosure, when he went in front of Amanda Sears, I did say he looked like a broke version of Steph Curry. I did say that. So we're going to look at them two debates today. So before we get into all that, let's see who's in the building. Reparations Nation, hello. SD Johnson, hello. Don P, hello. Stream Elements by you asshole, hello. DSA, hello. And for those who haven't said anything in the live chat or the comments, hello. Let's just get into the customary house cleaning and get to this because I feel like this is going to take a while.
Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Now go.
Let me go here. There's a growing concern.
I might as well start off with this. Now, it ain't my fault that Chad O. Jackson kind of looked like Hannibal Buress. It's not my fault. But what we're going to do is give you a little teaser of the type of person you fixing to hear.
Trump represents a political tactic. And I don't think politics is going to end wokeness. I think that can only be done spiritually. Amen. So I think people like.
One more time. I just want y'all to understand what he just said.
Trump represents a political tactic. And I don't think politics is going to end wokeness. I think that can only be done spiritually. Amen. So
okay. Sir, you do realize that the Bible is woke.
Jesus Christ. Is this a joke? Huh? Are you joking right now?
I'm going to say that again. The Bible is woke. You know, I know a whole lot of you love to run around and say that it's not, it's literally woke. It literally has multi-ethnic marriages in there. That's what y'all call a woke concept. The concept of a man having so much power around the feeling of man, that's woke. You know, there's gaslighting in the Bible that would be considered woke. The New Testament, a lot of people would relegate to wokeness. Spirituality is woke. But okay. All right.
I think people like Doug Wilson are more important to the end of wokeism than a politician. However, I do think that the political, I think, is helpful, but it's not the answer. And I know you're not saying that it's the answer. Yeah. But it's I think that's something interesting to pay attention to.
I don't even know what the fuck he said, but you know, that's how the black conservatives are. They just talk and say nothing. Okay, let's begin. He went to go see Jason Whitlock to go debate Delano Squires. Now, I've talked about Delano before on here. Me and him have had disagreements politically. So I'm taking all bias out of this. I'm going to watch this from an unbiased sense because I don't like both of those brothers. You know, I dislike Chad more. But let's see how it went.
You know, let me go here. There's a growing concern.
And by the way, this is not Whitlock's channel per se. This is not his Blaze channel per se. This is another channel. This is, I guess they're calling this podcast channel. I see the pivot. I see the pivot.
Get to work!
His peers in that generation was a force for good. I think one of the arguments is that, well, look at where the black community is now and what people do. And I would say, to be fair, I believe Chad does this at times as well, is to say, Black America is in a worse position now than it was in 1965 as it relates to several different measures. I say first and foremost being.
Before we begin as well, I mean, as it plays. I just want you to understand, for those who don't know, Delano is Trinidadian. Keep that in mind, because you're going to hear certain verbiage in here. He's Trinidadian.
Family. And because of that, we believe that the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. How civil rights were delivered to Black Americans, the process has led to damage within Black America. And again, I reject that position. And I'll put it simply this way. If you are a Black person who wants to go to school where you want, to live where you want, to shop where you want, to marry who you want, then you owe some debt of gratitude to the generation that came before you. So, I mean, that's my general position. And I think, again, this is consistent. The idea that there should be efforts to eradicate differences in treatment based on race is consistent both with our constitutional history and, history post 1776. Really quick, I just want to read a quick few lines.
You got a minute and 19.
Okay, a quick few lines from Justice Harlan. This is the dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson. He said, "In the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior, dominant ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. In respect of civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law. The humblest is the peer of the most powerful. The arbitrary separation of citizens on the basis of race while they are on a public highway is a badge of servitude wholly inconsistent with the civil freedom and the equality before the law established by the Constitution." This was in Plessy versus Ferguson. Brown versus Board of Ed overturned that particular decision. And again, he was the lone dissenter in Plessy. So I see King's work as a continuation of that thread from the Civil War, from the end of the Civil War through Reconstruction, that said, finally, we need laws in place that ensure that American citizens are no longer discriminated against based on race.
Delano, good opening statement. Chad, I do want to, before you go, I want to advise you, you can rebut what Delano says after you give your opening statement. So your opening statement doesn't have to be a direct rebuttal to what Delano said. So let me restate the question. We'll restart the clock here. Was Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement a force for good or a net negative for America in general and Black people in particular?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the Civil Rights Movement and King were not a force for good. Really what they were a force for federal expansion and the USSR propaganda. The USSR, the Soviet Union, literally called the Civil Rights Movement in America the strategic propaganda asset, because that's exactly what they were. When you look at King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, there was a direct line and an indirect line of communication between them and the Soviet Union. This goes back to the 1930s under the FDR administration, where you had the National Negro Congress, which was started by a commission out of the FDR administration, and Joseph Stalin himself. A. Philip Randolph was a leader of that organization. And by the time you get to the 1960s, he would hand the baton off to Martin Luther King. And so
I tell you, this guy is dumb. So now we're going to do indirects now. Okay. Yes, the Black Panther Party in Chicago was killed. Do you think the FBI did it, or did they get people to do it? I love how he keeps bringing up this USSR argument, yet the FBI, the whole American infrastructure didn't pick up on it. The USSR, at a time where the relations between us and the Russians were at their lowest, you think they were going to let a Black man who was visible get away with indirectly contacting them and they don't know? Okay. 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 Okay.
There has always been communist infiltration in the Civil Rights Movement, and it didn't change under Martin Luther King's leadership. I argue that this is a force for bad and is a detriment to Black Americans and to America at large, insofar that the communist ideology is antithetical to our way of life. It's antithetical to genuine success. I know Delano writes a lot about family values. He writes a lot about conventional methods and means to becoming successful. Communism is antithetical and downright hostile to those conventional means that my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents undertook to become successful. Whether you're talking about in rural Arkansas, whether you're talking about in rural Oklahoma, where my folks are from, or in Texas, where I live now. When you look at this notion.
And you got your ass kicked in 2016 trying to run for office. So you had to pivot away from the grift because nobody was listening to your policies. Your proposed policies, I should say. Got your ass kicked in the primary badly. All right.
Of what Marxism breeds in terms of exploiting grievances, as Thomas Sowell documents, as well as.
And there we go. Thomas Sowell, we dropping already. And Thomas Sowell was a Marxist, sir. And he still has Marxist leanings. So go ahead. Explain how Thomas Sowell was right. Go ahead.
Williams and other scholars, you saw this kind of upward mobility. As Thomas Sowell documents, as well as the late Walter E. Williams and other scholars, you saw this kind of upward mobility, this upward trajectory on the part of colored people from the 19th century well into the 1940s and 50s. And then as this kind of cultural Marxist rhetoric, this kind of feel sorry for me grievance rhetoric began to take off with the help of the press.
Cultural Marxists. So nothing else happened. It's just words that crippled the Black community into where we are now from what you call the height of prosperity. Nothing else happened, right? It was just words by the USSR.
On the part of the civil rights activists, you saw the spirit of embitterness really enter colored culture, what we now call Black culture. And that has had an adverse effect on, again, not only Black culture, but also the larger American society. And I'll end by saying this. When you look at the late Nikki Giovanni, who was a poet, a radical Marxist feminist, she said in an interview with James Baldwin that Black folks in America, she acknowledged this, Black folks in America have always been successful and have always had businesses. People can look this up on YouTube right now. She said that, however, my generation, we were not good business people. We were good civil rights people. We decided to become activists. And when you look at the fact that from around that time to today, you see this kind of widening of the disparities, gaps, and so on and so forth. And you see this kind of embracing this bitterness and the spirit of entitlement that we now have.
Entitlement. Okay. Entitlement.
And you look at what King was saying in the 1960s, along with people like James Baldwin and others, they were really instilling the spirit of bitterness. And this was part of the kind of Soviet propaganda program that they were implementing. And so,
maybe they just saw what was going on and said, "Nah, something got to change." It couldn't be that, right? They were just being bitter. Oh, okay, all right. Bitter.
No, it was a complete detriment to the larger American society.
We're good. Delano, we'll restart the clock in 2 minutes. Delano, go ahead with your rebuttal.
So I find it interesting when you asked Chad whether MLK was a force for good. One of his first moves was to talk about the civil rights sort of era with respect to federal expansion. And I'm not surprised because I've consumed a fair amount of Chad's work. Not all of it. I mean, so Chad is a prolific documentarian, and I give him credit for that. But at times it seems as if Chad seems to believe that government becomes more moral the closer it gets to the people. So for him, and again, Chad, you will correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing is the federal expansion, federal overreach from his perspective is really the main sin here. And I would counter that by asking pointedly whether Chad believes that, let's say in 1965, 64, 55, that separate spaces, right? Basically, should Black folks have been continued to be subjected to separate public accommodations, separate entrances, whether it's water fountains, restaurants, restrictive housing covenants, anti-miscegenation laws? Chad, is your perspective that those things should have stayed in place until such time when the populace within a particular state said, we are ready to no longer discriminate against our Black citizens in the ways that we have been doing? Is that your position?
I'll articulate my position in a more elaborate way when I get a chance. I don't know if I can answer that in a simple yes or no. But with a gun to my head, I would say yes, because that's in keeping with what Booker T. Washington laid out, and that was actually yielding the fruit that it was desired to yield.
So we can come back to that in the back and forth aspect of this. Delano, if you got 20, 30 more seconds, if you had anything else you wanted to rebut, or we can...
No, we can go to chat.
It looks like he just wants to move right into the...
No, you got your time.
Which is fine.
You reclaim your time.
Restart the clock 2 minutes, and you can rebut what you heard from Delano.
So one of the things that Delano brought up in his opening statements, he brought up what life was like. And with all due respect, this is one of the things that the left often does, which is they really kind of lean into the art of storytelling and imagine.
Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this idiot right here on the right already made the first mistake. Now, again, I've had my dealings with Delano Squires. He's not a leftist. So I'm already knowing that this man did not do research on his opponent. If you can't even get the basics right, you shouldn't be debating.
Yourself as a black man in the 1930s or what have you, so as to really kind of push this notion or this narrative that the conditions were such that there needed to be drastic, radical change. But the thing about it is, when you look at the rhetoric of revolution that a lot of the civil rights activists and the other social justice activists were really pushing in those days, this idea of revolution, a lot of it was the exacerbation, the exaggeration, the exploitation of grievances. This is part of the kind of Marxist framework. We try to find a grievance, we exploit it to the hills, and we try.
Oh, I want y'all to hear this again, because I'm going to prove something. Since old Chad O. Jackson wants to play conservative.
Activists and the other social justice activists were really pushing in those days this idea of revolution. A lot of it was the exacerbation, the exaggeration, the exploitation of grievances. This is part of the.
Oh, okay. I know you're talking about the civil rights. So am I allowed to then say that them Trump supporters on January 6th were social justice warriors? Since they had grievances and they went and marched towards the Capitol and went in the building. Am I allowed to say that? I think I'm allowed. Since we're going to use that criteria, I think we should be able to use that.
Kind of Marxist framework. We try to find a grievance, we exploit it to the hills, and we try to get people riled up enough to where they then will take to the streets. It will cause unrest. It will.
Boom. Unite the right too. January 6th. There you go. You're no different than the No Kings protesters. You're no different than Occupy Wall Street. He'd probably say the 2015 Million Man March. He'll probably say that that was Marxist. So according to Chad O. Jackson, protesting is Marxist. Say less. Go ahead.
Cause this kind of destabilization phase. And out of that destabilization, people will cry out for the federal government to come in and do something about it. When you read Lisa Galliobuff's book, she's a professor out of Virginia Law School. She wrote a book called The Lost Promise of Civil Rights, and she's not ideologically on my side. She's a leftist, but she even makes the point that the civil rights division of the Justice Department was built for the purpose of government expansion, which goes back to the question that you had about, is it my view that the closer you get to the people, the more.
Oh, so you mean on the right where y'all was saying less government, but now you're over there. And I know, Chad, you didn't say anything about this because I looked. You didn't say anything about them white people talking about, oh, their civil rights are being violated. If you don't believe in it, you should have went in on them saying you have no civil rights. Civil rights is a Marxist anthology. And it does nothing for you. Since you want to argue that it regress black people, then you should say white people, if you're claiming and crying about your civil rights being violated because you're white, you don't have any, and you should join me in abolishing it. Let's see if they'll join you. And all the protections that it grants. Let's see if they'll join you. You won't be able to go after your employer no more. They'll fire you for everything and anything. You'll have cops on your goddamn trains, buses, airplanes, and all that denying you access, even though you paid for it. I guess y'all want cops running up in your house. Oh, I know you're gonna tell me the Fourth Amendment, right? Yeah, because we've seen how they follow the Fourth Amendment. Okay, all right. That I would just love to see Texas suspend their civil rights laws. I would love to see that.
More moral the government is. In a sense, yes. Because the fact of the matter is we are a country made up of diverse people with diverse backgrounds and diverse beliefs. And this is why I would side more with the anti-federalists, Patrick Henry, Robert Yates, Luther Martin, and others, that believe that to the extent that you try to have this big, overarching, strong federal power that's centralized, you're going to have the kind of resentment, the kind of unrest, and all the things that breed from that because we are so diverse. So you need to have it kind of condensed down as much as you possibly can to make it closer to the people.
And that's where they get that doctrine of we're all one race, the human race. You just heard it, by the way. Screenshot, because Whitlock looked like he just saw another chick on his. Well, this is Whitlock. He saw some more gay porn again, Googling it, and it came up, and he trying to make sure nobody saw it. So, go ahead.
At this point, it's on you all. You go back and forth. You got questions you want to ask or whatever, do it now. We can go 10, 15 minutes, knock yourself out.
So where Chad started there was, I almost fell out of my, Chad said that I was engaging in the art of storytelling. I would wager Chad has at least 100 hours of storytelling as it relates to MLK and the civil rights movement. And one of the things, and I've said this publicly so I can say it here, is that when I consume Chad's work, I noticed the use oftentimes of adjectives where I think verbs should be.
Oh my God. We there, family. They out here rapping.
I told you punk ass niggas to get off the motherfucking timeline and rap. That's the problem. You niggas be crying. You niggas be bitching. You niggas need to fucking rap. When you can't nobody else come up here if they not rapping like that. Stay your punk ass at home.
Oh my God. He said you put adjectives where verbs are gonna be. What is that you say, Delano? He tried to say black is a verb. Oh, this finna get good. Let's go.
Get to work.
Nefarious, right? So instead of saying this person said this or this person did that, what Chad would say is, oh, this particular act, the law was passed under nefarious circumstances. That's the art of storytelling. Chad, in his opener, talked about how Black people lived in the South, and I've heard him talk about there was more harmony between Blacks and whites in the South than people want to give credit to, and that might be the case in some places, in some locales. But the notion that storytelling is sort of the exclusive province of the left is something that that's come on now, we can't say that. So that was one small point. But again, I would ask Chad, do you think that a Black man who wanted to shop in a particular retailer and was told you cannot shop here because you were a Black man had a legitimate grievance, let's say in the year 1955?
No.
Okay.
Because we have freedom of association.
Okay.
And if a white store owner doesn't want you shopping in their store, I believe it's their right to not allow you to shop in their store. And on the contrary, I believe if you're a Black man who owns a store and don't want white people coming in, that's perfectly right. It doesn't make it right, but it is.
Jesus Christ. Y'all caught it. Y'all caught it.
No.
Okay.
Because we have freedom of association.
Okay.
And if a white store owner don't want you shopping in their store, I believe it's their right to not allow you to shop in their store. And on the contrary, I believe if you're a Black man who owns a store and don't want white people coming in, that's perfectly right. It doesn't make it right, but it.
Nigga. It's okay for the white man to deny service, but the Black man denying service, that's wrong. Nigga. Yeah. He say he was born in Oklahoma and now he live in Texas. Nigga. Why? See what I mean? This is the Black conservative. They always got to give a caveat to Black people trying to do something that everybody else got to do. White people can go 20 miles over the speed limit. That's okay. They got somewhere to go. Black man going 20 miles over the speed limit. No, he need to get a ticket. Yeah, you can do it, but you got, really? So black men can't have discretion. Oh, okay. Yeah. And we've seen what happens when black people have opened their doors to everybody. We've seen that, especially white people. We've seen it. I wish I was in that room. I would have said, so does that apply to that church in Charleston with Dylan Roof? Did that apply? Because I'm sure there's white churches that ain't gonna allow black people in there. And you wouldn't have said there was nothing wrong with that. You would have said black people were going over there looking for trouble. Huh.
It is your freedom of association. And so I believe that matters such as that should be handled in the marketplace. I don't believe that we should cede.
Wrong, because when we handled it in the marketplace, y'all said we were doing too much. Remember, fam, when we were denied service, what did we do? We went on Yelp and Google and the rest of them and put out the story. They said we were doing too much. We were harming businesses. We were the actual enemy. They want us to exist without a voice. F that.
To the government, the right to force people to serve those whom they don't want to serve or hire, whom they don't want to hire for, or not be able to fire people for certain reasons that they find to be fitting. And so yes, this idea that it is a legitimate grievance that a black man who was denied the transaction of buying a sandwich should now go to the government and have the government calm down and put a gun to the person's head to serve me. I don't believe.
No, that's not what they're saying. See, you see how they messed it up already? That's not what he's saying. Nobody's saying they don't have the right of refusal. What we're saying is do not go out there and be overt with it. Because we also saw that same structure go out there and try to legislate that black people should not shop in white stores. Or did you forget that? Yeah, he must have forgotten in his infinite studies of MLK. He must have forgot that was happening in the Jim Crow South where he allegedly come from. He must have forgot that. Huh. Interesting.
Believe in that level of coercion by any stretch of the imagination. I do, however, believe in desegregation. In other words, I don't believe that there should be laws on the books where the state is forcing segregation. And so to that extent, I do believe that those laws should be done away with. And those laws were being done away with. I mean, whether you're talking about, from the turn of the 20th century into the middle part of the 20th century, you did see some of these laws being repealed and giving credit where credit is due. The NAACP were taking some of these cases to court and they were having victories in the courts. But then a lot of it too was through people coming together on the ground level, having nothing to do with the government at all. These were what we call interracial commissions, where responsible Negro and white leaders were working out their differences, working out their issues without it ever getting to the courts or getting to the legislature or what have you. And so this is what we call the reformative process. With the reformative process, you have a character building component in it because it takes hard work. But once you achieve whatever it is you seek to achieve through that reformative process, it is sustainable insofar that it requires character in order to be maintained. However,
what the fuck are you talking about? I'm gonna let him come. I don't know where he going with this. Let me see.
You have the revolutionary process, this quick, sudden uprising that exploits grievances, that sows discord, that creates agitation in the streets. Such to where, again, people cry out for federal legislation and quick, fast, and
wrong. They could no. See, okay. So now I see what he's doing. He's trying to advocate for community building. Nothing wrong with that. But he also is negating the fact that the government is sitting there trying to stop community building, but then trying to conflate it by saying that people are crying out for the government to stop doing what they're doing so people can community build. I see what you're doing. Sir, there's plenty of communities in this country where they don't have government interference and they're doing quite well. It's you bitches online that start complaining when they do that. When people want to take back their neighborhoods and their towns and their cities, y'all bitch to the government, saying how wrong that is. Then you go and bitch about the city government or the state government doing what they're doing. at the same time. You can't serve both masters. You can't be an advocate for the people. They get pissed off when they're trying to do something. You can't be an advocate for the government. They get pissed off when they do something. You got to pick one. Either you for the people or you for the government. And Chad, you're for the government. As much as you want to sit up here and try to go for the individual citizen, you're for the government.
In a hurry right now, to the extent that the new social norm is predicated not on character, but rather law and law alone. That is going to, I mean, first of all, it's artificial, but then two, that new norm that you have will self-implode. It's only a matter of time. And when you look at the Nick Fuentes type, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but when you look at the Nick Fuentes types and you look at this kind of contingent that are now rising up as the pendulum swings from the civil rights industry, that's not sustainable.
Why in the fuck are you bringing up Nick Fuentes? Nick Fuentes literally used his civil rights that are granted to him in this country to get a woman arrested. Why are you bringing him up? The same dude who wants you in jail because you're black. The same dude who would classify you as an Uncle Tom because you're sitting next to Jason Whitlock on your left. And yes, the video is mirrored. That's why I said left.
And it doesn't, anyway, I've been rambling.
You said nothing.
So I want to ask two questions to sort of bracket what I understand to be your governing philosophies in two periods of time. You talked, excuse me, you used the word revolution. You talked about how, you know, sort of revolutionary change is not sustainable. Would you apply that to the American founding as well?
Well, that's actually a tough question because the difference is you did have a,
excuse me, you used the word revolution. You talked about how, you know, sort of revolutionary change is not sustainable. Would you apply that to the American founding as well?
Well, that's actually a tough question because the difference is you did have a foreign entity that was governing us from afar.
Okay.
And, you know, here you've already had a long established culture that has existed for a long period of time. And
so why is it called the American Revolution or the American Revolutionary War? What the fuck? He don't even know American history and he from this soil, but he want to debate MLK and what he did? Yeah, man, y'all pissing me off, man. Not y'all in the audience. Y'all all right. You black conservatives pissing me off, man. Y'all don't even know the basics. It's literally called the American Revolutionary War. It's not a tough question. The founding of America was built off a revolution. And if you're going to take that tack, sir, that means that the Boston Tea Party meant nothing. Gettysburg meant nothing. Valley Forge meant nothing. Is that what we're doing? Can't stand these cats, boy.
I would say that it's different than the kind of subversive kind of agitation that we saw with communist revolution.
I mean, there was certainly agitation. There was certainly violence in the streets. There were a list of grievances. Correct.
Yeah, there were grievances, but again, the way that communism disseminates through deceptive, subversive means is altogether different than what Thomas Jefferson, for example, was doing in terms of really laying out and airing out the grievances. And of course, if you're talking about like the Boston Tea Party, if you're talking about things like that where they dressed up in Indian garb and things like that, and they were kind of moving deceptively, point very well taken. But I tend to see I tend to see what we were doing during the so-called Revolutionary War and the spread of communism as two completely different things.
But I think part of that is because you are reaching a conclusion, and that's fair for you because you'll say, look, I've done the historical research and I reached this conclusion. But I think you're reaching a conclusion where an argument should be, because your entire characterization of the civil rights era is basically this was communist and therefore it was negative, right? So it's either, and I mean, we're human beings, so sometimes you can have tension within your principles. But when I hear you say, you know, revolutions are not sustainable forms of social change, agitation, violence in the street, and then you say, well, The American founding, sure, we had our own culture. The government who was ruling us was far away. I mean, black folk can say, look, we had our own culture for hundreds of years. The people who are ruling over us may be near, but we have similar grievances, right? We don't have representation. I was watching a video with you last night, actually, and it sounded like you were making an argument against enfranchising free black males post-Civil War. And you correct me if that argument was wrong, if I'm mischaracterizing it. So it seems as if there's some tension in your principles, and I'm just trying to understand that. The War for Independence, the American founding was one point. The second point, and again, this is more contemporary, would you then, just given what you said about the ability of private enterprises to serve whom they want, to hire whom they want, would you then be in favor of, let's say, what conservatives characterize as DEI policies, where companies say we're going to favor Black, Hispanic, LGBT, women, whatever, non-white males in hiring and promotion over white males? Would you be in favor of that? And do you think federal or state law that prohibits that, would you characterize those as federal overreaches or government overreaches?
I'm going to try to reframe your question to understand it better.
Okay.
So are you asking, is it okay for a private organization, entity, school, company to have DEI policies? Is that what you're asking?
No, I want to put a finer point on it. When I say DEI, because people mean different things when they string those three letters together. I'm talking specifically. If Coca-Cola in 1954 said we're not hiring Negroes, if we have Negroes, they bring the sodas into the rest.
Another disingenuous black conservative. You know exactly what he means when he's talking about DEI. You're not going to worm your way out of it.
And then they go on about their business. It sounds as if your position would be Coca-Cola has a right to do that. If Coca-Cola in 2026 says, we're not hiring any more white dudes, to the extent that we have white dudes in this company, they will no longer get promotions. And when we have internal meetings, the people of color go in one room and the white people go in another room. I'm asking, would you be okay with that?
Constitutionally speaking, it's their right. Coca-Cola has a right to do what Coca-Cola wants to do. I might not like it. My neighbor might not like it, but I have nothing to do with Coca-Cola. I didn't put in the blood, sweat, and tears to build Coca-Cola. Therefore, what my opinion is, whether as a voter or just as a man on the streets, should have no bearing over, on what they do. So, I mean, I don't know about the legalities over, the difference between publicly traded companies versus private, like legitimately private companies.
Right.
But even to the extent that there is a difference, I do believe that in many ways, a lot of what is done in this country is a complete betrayal, if you will, of our genuine constitutional principles. And so, speaking in terms of constitutional intent and the freedom of association, I don't believe. I do believe that Coca-Cola should have a right to run their business, how they wish to run their business, and the decision as to whether they will stay in business or how well they'll do as a business should be left to the free market.
So then, let's say the conservative activists, and I'm asking these questions because, again,
how'd that work for Budweiser, sir? How'd that work for Anheuser-Busch? How'd that work? Your conservative friends tried to bankrupt that company because they wanted to use Dylan Mulvaney, and they're still around. I guess it didn't work well, right? I guess the free market said, "Nah, we still gonna deal with Budweiser." And it was not lost on me that he brought up Coca-Cola, who everybody in the world knows their headquarters is in Atlanta, a black city. It wasn't lost on me that he tried to pull that.
I'm making parallels, and also I'm trying to true up the scales because I want to understand sort of the principles that undergird your argument. So conservative activists would say this is anti-white discrimination and this should be eliminated using the force of law. You would say would you characterize those people as agitators in the same way you would, sort of 1960s or civil rights protesters or?
Yeah, I mean, I do that all the time.
Okay.
And this is why, again, I don't really have a political home. I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat because I believe in the true intent and the true edicts of the Constitution. If up to me, we would even go back before the Constitution to the Confederation of States, quite frankly. But I don't believe in this kind of, I don't like this thing happening in society. Let us run to the government and have them do something about it. I don't like that because to the extent that you do that, it becomes this ever expanding thing. And again, you can't do that when you have a country so large as ours, so diverse as ours. I mean, Texas is not the same as Tennessee, it's not the same as Georgia, it's not the same as New York. We are so, and even within states, you have different towns and different cities and different counties. You have rural areas and metropolitan areas. We're so different. And so to have this kind of, I don't like this, let us now take it to the courts, let us now take it to the feds and have them do something about it. We seek safety and security in big government, and that's the part that I don't like. And so whether it's Republicans doing it or whether it's Democrats doing it, I don't like it either way. But what I am saying though is that when you look at the civil rights movement, when you look at a lot of the social justice movements over the course of the 20th century, they were doing it better than anyone, insofar that their kind of brain trust, the puppeteers, if you will, who are pulling the strings. These are people who have, and I made this point on Jason's show, these are people who studied the soft sciences, who studied the social sciences, who studied human behavior and group behavior, and they're using it to their advantage. I mean, when you look at, for example, in the USSR and how they were developing these ideas and developing these means of population control and controlling of public opinion, so on and so forth, when you look at the fact that they wanted to imperialize their ideology throughout the world through the domino effect, and wanted to do so in a way that doesn't really require having to pick up a gun against a nation. They did it through implosion. They did it through infiltration and subversion, and they were having success all over the world. The problem in the United States is that you had, by and large, a kind of church-going people, especially in the South. Negroes were heavily church-going, as you well know. And so this created a kind of captive audience. In the 1930s, of course, you had the Communist Party resolve to infiltrate the church. And so whether you're talking about Earl Browder's outstretched hand, whether you're talking about the work of Bella Dodd, of course, she would do it through the teachers' unions, but she writes about how the communists were infiltrating Protestant and Catholic seminaries and churches in order to blur the lines between Christianity and communism. And we know as Christians that we are not to participate in darkness, but we're to expose darkness. And so nobody did this better than Martin Luther King in terms of blurring the lines. And I don't know if we're going to get into this later in the debate, but the fact of the matter is, with the help of the press and with the kind of instructions of his handlers, King was able to, in a sense, he was able to, what's the word I want to use here? He was able to kind of collectivize the people through charisma and through his kind of charm and through his oratory and through his speeches, which sounded like one thing, but if you go back and listen to those speeches and you know what you're listening to, you're going to hear something completely different. And what this did is it kind of knocked us off our square, as it were, and it caused particularly the young Black radicals who were deviating from the kind of trajectory laid forth for them by their parents and grandparents. What it did was it
I don't know what he's talking about. What is he talking about?
It kind of caused a lot of people to adopt this mentality that the way to be successful is through agitative means, is through revolution. And as a result of this, you saw this kind of downward trajectory.
So what do you think an election is, sir? He literally just explained what an election is. What's one of the characteristics of an election? But go ahead.
For them, by their parents and grandparents. What it did was it kind of caused a lot of people to adopt this mentality that the way to be successful is through agitative means, is through revolution. And as a result of this, you saw this kind of downward trajectory.
You literally, that's what literally people vote on, their economics. They get agitated that things are going downhill and the other person is telling you they'll make it better, and they're in such a state that they're gonna go to the basics escapes them.
Go ahead. Last one. We got to move on.
It's interesting because on one hand, you will point to government overreach as the problem, right? But then on the other hand, you'd say, well, no, it's sort of collective action. And my thing is, prior to 1964, if King and other leaders are saying, look, there's certain things where there's unequal treatment based on race, and we want to mobilize people to change these things, right? And you would say this is on account of the handlers. I will stipulate I'm not the historian that you are, Chad, right? I do think it's interesting though, because I feel at times you use Marxism the way the left uses racism, which is to say around every corner and underneath every sheet.
Oh no,
but that's that'll be my characterization. But that's fine, right? We can disagree on that.
I want to jump in there. Hold on, I want to jump in here, and I want to do this rarely though.
Whoa! Why are you jumping in? This is between them. You see, now y'all see the agenda. Why are you jumping in as a moderator? If you're not going to correct the fact that somebody said, and they may have said it incorrectly, you're not supposed to be jumping in as a moderator. Your job is to keep the conversation going. Okay. I know why he did this too, because him and Delano have gone at each other's throats on social media. Okay, go ahead.
Ism is antithetical to Christianity, and I do believe it's an evil, and it's a tool of Satan. And I do believe.
Say it again.
Agree on that. I want to jump in there. Hold on, I want to jump in here, and I want to do this rarely though. But Marxism is antithetical to Christianity, and I do believe it's an evil, and it's a tool of Satan. And I do believe Satan is.
It's a tool of Satan. Marxism. That's going to be a new one. A tool of Satan. Because they had Marxism way back in Bible days. Marxism. Oh, okay. Okay. He's going to tell us now that the kings were practicing Marxists because they kept down the people. So the people had to rise up. That's going to be the new thing they're going to tell you. So now you're going to bring religion into something that's political and economic. Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. Go ahead.
In control of the world. And so I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to think, oh, Marxism and that ideology is around every corner, because that's Satan. And so it's like when I'm listening to this debate, and again, I'm hearing Chad on a completely different level. I've had conversations, had you on, but Delano's forcing you to go a cut deeper, and it's like, this man, and I'm not, but I'm just telling you my real reaction, and I'm sorry for jumping in here, but it's like, this man is sitting over, nope, God is my sole provider, period, end of story. And we've been hoodwinked by MLK and all this other stuff. Like, nope, the government is an equal or superior provider for you in this life than God. And it's like, this discussion and what you're bringing out of Chad, very fascinating to me. But I will say, like, when I hear people like Marxism, the devil, Satan, things trying to move you away from God being your sole provider, it is around every corner. That's not a conspiracy theory, in my view.
Well, I would obviously I would make the argument that, and let me not use the word racism because it's so loaded, but I would argue that partiality, I'll use a biblical term, based on ethnicity is also a sin. Now, we can debate which one is a greater sin. What I would certainly argue is that in this country, Marxism is the enemy at the door, and racism is the monster under the bed. We're not Cuba. We haven't had Fidel Castro for 40 plus years. So the idea that, oh no.
Hold on, I just want to follow you through here. When you said racism is under the bed, you mean partiality is what you love?
Correct. Ethnic partiality is inside the house already. It's not something that has to be fought off from the outside, right? So I wanted, well, let me finish the point I was gonna make, which is, I get your point about government overreach, but a charismatic leader galvanizing people who want to follow him, because you can only be a leader if you have people following you, to change hearts and minds, how is that also evil? Because that's how social movements work, whether that's the fight against abortion or whether that'll be a fight to reestablish traditional marriage. It's always somebody leading something with the intention of changing hearts and minds. So I don't understand, if it's not tied directly to government overreach, why what King and his cohorts were doing, you would see as necessarily negative and detrimental.
I'll try to answer the question as briefly as I possibly can, because Jason wants to move on. But what I recommend people do, and I think I mentioned this on Jason's show before, so pardon me if I'm being redundant here, but what I recommend people do is go and read a book by Walter Lippmann, written in 1921, 1922, called Public Opinion. And in it, he lays out exactly what King would later do when it comes to galvanizing the public. Because that's the thing, in a democracy or in a constitutional republic, the way that you have social change is through social movements, right?
You just explained MAGA. I can't hear this fool no more. You literally just explained MAGA. What social movement? Okay. Dr. King was fighting against laws that were already on the books, sir. Literally. Let's just go to the next one because I can't do this, especially with Whitlock there. I can't do it. So this one, as I said, he debated the dude that looks like a broke Steph Curry. They debated many things: communism, Booker T. Washington, MLK, civil rights. Let's see what this one is. My head hurts already.
Which wasn't written by him. They were written by Stanley Levison, who was his ghostwriter, who was his editor. King would write some manuscripts, yes, that's to be sure, but Stanley Levison would take over the project. He would beef it up. And what's interesting about Stanley Levison is Stanley Levison was an atheist. He was a secularist. He was ethnically Jewish, and that's not any red meat. That's just to say that he wasn't black, right? And he was following suit to the 1930s call that came down from Earl Browder, who was the then leader of the Communist Party, where they specifically had this plan to infiltrate the church, right? Because what they found, what the communists found, is that one of their biggest hurdles of disseminating their ideology into the West and into America in particular is the fact that you have this Christian faith. You have a church-going people who are genuinely hostile to the spread of communism. So how do we jump this hurdle? Earl Browder believed that you can't be hostile to these people. You can't be hostile to their faith. What you must do instead is infiltrate. And so what the communists then did in the 1930s is that they infiltrated churches and seminaries, both Protestant and Catholic. Bella Dodd wrote about this in her book, School of Darkness. Fulton Sheen actually wrote about this as well. The communists were actively infiltrating the church. And so the reason that's important to bring that up is because this is the ilk from which Stanley Levison came. Well, before he actually worked with King, he worked with a publication, a Christian publication called The Churchman. So what is an atheist doing, trying to, working with this so-called Christian magazine, this Christian journal? Essentially what he's doing is he's trying to, in a sense, infiltrate, just like many communists were at the time, especially during the Cold War, infiltrate the church so as to subvert or to blur the lines between Christianity and communism. This was the editor, this was the, for all intents and purposes, PR person, the ghostwriter, the speechwriter for Martin Luther King, a so-called Negro minister.
Well, there were multiple. First of all, let's go back. There were multiple instances and multiple allegations of not just Martin Luther King, but multiple Black graduates of high institutions and high universities that had been accused of plagiarism upon multiple investigations. And while this is not an excuse for Dr. King, I have never seen any objective evidence produced that Stanley Levison wrote the book "Where Do We Go From Here," which was published while Dr. King was on vacation in Jamaica. In fact, what is well documented is that he spent a week in Jamaica by himself, isolated, writing the book of his own volition. So I have no objective evidence that proves that Levison wrote that book, which is the book that I just quoted from. And what is, again, more interesting is the core of my argument is the gospel of Jesus Christ is deeper than repent. We have to agree at some point. First of all, we have to start. Communism's attempt to infiltrate Christianity does nothing to destroy the legacy that Dr. King produced by producing legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the Equal Housing Act of 68. All of these laws serve to mitigate and destroy the economic disparity that was largely created by segregation.
No,
I don't know that
they serve to expand the power of the federal government at the expense of genuine liberty for the individual. That's what they serve to do. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
please go ahead.
No. Please go ahead. I respond to that. I don't mind. How was the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, and the Equal Housing Act of 68 an overreach of government power?
Well, the Voting Rights or the Civil Rights Act of 1964 infringed upon one's individual right to freedom of association.
How so?
And insofar that if I'm a business owner and I put in my own blood, sweat, and tears, and I took out a loan maybe to start my own business, I should have the right to discriminate against whom I wish to discriminate. I should have the right to serve whom I wish to serve. I should have the right to hire whom I wish to hire. And the decision as to whether I should stay in business or not should be left not to the government, but to the free market.
So you should be able to discriminate against who you hire based on the color of their skin?
Yes, absolutely. Here's the
So
thing.
wait a minute.
We have to and the decision as to whether I should stay in business or not should be left not to the government, but to the free market.
So you should be able to discriminate against who you hire based on the color of their skin?
Yes, absolutely. Here's the
So
thing.
wait a minute.
We have to be adults. We have to be adult. We have to be adult enough to have this conversation. Should be left not to the government, but to the free market.
So you should be able to discriminate against who you hire based on the color of their skin?
Yes, absolutely. Here's
That first one we watched was January 19th. This was on January 4th. Yeah.
Here's the
So
thing.
wait a minute.
We have to be adults. We have to be adult. We have to be adult enough to have this conversation.
So you wait a
running to
minute.
the
So
government.
As a,
Hold on.
wait, wait,
Running to the
as a
government.
black, hold on. I have to ask this. As a black man in 2025, you are saying that the Civil Rights Act of 64 was an overreach of constitutional authority because you should be allowed, as a business owner, to discriminate against someone based purely on the color of their skin.
You should be allowed 100%. And here's why, Austin. If there is a owner of a certain establishment, let's say a barbecue restaurant, who don't like Negroes for no other reason than the fact that their skin color is black, I would rather know that he doesn't like Negroes for the fact that their skin color is black, rather than going into his establishment and he is having to serve me because he's compelled to do so by the government and end up getting my food spat on or end up getting something, poisoned or whatever the case may be. I would rather know who the bigot is, who the person who's discriminating against me is, versus them hiding behind this legislation that's supposed to make all things equal. But what it does in effect is it destabilizes and demoralizes society. It breeds resentment.
How does
and the whole gamut.
how does it degrade society to do justly, to love mercy, and to do what's right? How does it degrade society to do unto others as you would them do unto you? How does that degrade society?
Because
How does
what
actually
you're doing-
applying the gospel degrade society?
What you're doing is you're playing fast and loose with the scriptures.
No.
Yes, the scriptures are for the remnant. The scriptures are for those who.
But I thought we were a Christian country, so it shouldn't matter that he brought that up. You shouldn't call the scripture fast and loose. That's literally what it says. Oh, here we go.
Decided to repent and to put their trust and faith in Christ. We can't coerce people into obeying something that they don't believe in or that they don't agree with. Yes, we have basic rights as it pertains to the protection of property, as it pertains to the protection of life, so on and so forth. But to, again, take the Great Samaritan analogy and say, this is why we must pass legislation that coerces a taxpayer to be as benevolent as you want them to be. Whenever Jesus was preaching and teaching and everybody were following him, and the hour was getting late, what did his disciples say? The hour's getting late, send them into the market that they might be fed, and so on and so forth. Jesus looked at him and said, you feed them. The objective to be benevolent is for the church. It's for the Christian. It's for the person who actually put their faith in Christ and have the means and is using their wherewithal.
I think
to do justly. So again,
I think you're cutting off a piece of that scripture though, Chad, because if I'm not mistaken, that's the same exact parable where when Jesus tells them to feed them, they say, Lord, we have but only a few loaves. And the Lord multiplied the loaves and fed the thousands of men and women beside the kids.
The government didn't do it.
Well, Jesus Christ is
the taxes of the IRS didn't do it.
That doesn't matter. But the beauty of it.
What the fuck? Why are you bringing it? See, this is why you don't bring Christianity and the government into that. You see, they confusing each other now.
Joke's on you.
I hope y'all also understand that he contradicted what he was going to say 15 days later. you had a religious figure help community build, and then you just went 15 days later and argued that you should be able to do both and then still have the argument against both. This is why I said he can't debate MLK. He doesn't even know America.
It is when your racism or your bigotry by deciding to not hire someone based on the color of their skin, when that impacts interstate commerce, the law can get involved, and that's exactly what the great Charles Hamilton Houston did. He laid the groundwork from a court perspective that led to the federal government being forced to compel you to give people equal protection under the law, because we proved this time and time again in American history that separate but equal is never equal. This is exactly why the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision was so important. This is exactly why Brown versus Board of Education was such a vital piece of legislation. Black Americans in this country had never received equivalent access or equivalent treatment to economic resources. And in fact, this is not even something that's just inherently Kingian. When in American history did Black Americans receive equal opportunity and equal economic resources in this country?
Who is the distributor of equal opportunity and equal, like all the things?
You can't answer that question with a question.
Yeah,
when
I
did,
can,
the question is, when did Black Americans, if the question is, when did Black Americans ever receive equivalent economic resources or even equivalent access
to say
to
receive, that implies that there's somebody who is distributing that which you are receiving.
The federal government.
So the federal government is responsible for giving you an equal opportunity.
They were responsible for the Homestead Acts, which gave away more than 233 million acres of land in the West and the Midwest.
So that assumes.
So
Okay, you're quoting King.
No. This isn't a quotation. This is a direct reference.
Direct
not
quotation.
only it is a direct. It's a King quotation, but he's referencing the Homestead Acts, which is what I stated, gave away 230 million acres of land in the West and the Midwest to white European peasant farmers. Yet, not one to this day.
Black people had access to that as well.
How? How many got it?
You'll see in my documentary.
No,
we actually
wait for the documentary to get the number.
We actually make the. Hey, I'm going to do some plugging here.
I love it.
I came here on my own dime. So
we both did. I respect it.
So here's the fact. You're quoting King,
a historical source as well, but
okay. So you're what you're saying too. It implies the somehow moral goodness of the Homestead Act to begin with. I'm not one who believes that we can fix everything with a government act. So to say that, oh, well, blacks had, whites had access to Social Security and blacks didn't during its inception or during its original rollout. Therefore, it's unjust, it's unequal. We need to balance it, and we need to give everybody access to Social Security. We need to give everybody access to this or that. For me, I don't agree with that presumption at all, because I don't believe in an ever expanding federal government, which is meant to Sovietize our system in such a way that that genuine liberty is ever being infringed upon. That's what's actually happening in our country. And King was a pretty big part of that, insofar that King took us, and I say this all the time, he took us from a trying race to a crying race.
Wow.
What King did is he taught us how to beg and plead. He taught us how to, he basically told us, take your hand off the proverbial plow, pick up your picket signs, because the picket sign will bring you liberation in America. That's what King did. Because again, you can look at the numbers, you can look at the data. Blacks were on an upward trajectory from the 1800s till around the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, and then black men.
And what happened? I asked the last time, what happened, sir? What happened? What happened?
Started leaving the house en masse, and they started abandoning their wives and kids. And
this nigga jumped 20 years. Let's keep it on the 1800s to 1940. What happened?
Dr. King spoke to the same issue, and even Daniel Patrick Moynihan spoke to the same issue. The black community was at its economically strongest while being at its poorest from 1940 through 1966, specifically. When Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote his Moynihan Report, which was a letter to Lyndon Baines Johnson, he said that one of the greatest problems that is impacting the black community is the root cause of it was a horrendous economic injustice visited upon black people by slavery. That's not Martin Luther King, by the way. That's Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was the deputy secretary under Lyndon Johnson. Richard Nixon, who was also a Republican president, picked up Moynihan's idea of a guaranteed annual income to mitigate and combat the economic injustices that were still being visited upon African Americans. That has nothing to do with Martin Luther King. He was the inspiration for the framework, but is that inherently communist to ensure that equal opportunity is given to everyone? I'm not asking for equal outcome, but I'm talking about equal opportunity here specifically.
I mean, it doesn't matter, like semantics. We can use semantics till we're blue in the face. The reality of it is, if your definition of equal opportunity means a radical redistribution of wealth, means a universal basic income, then yes, that's Sovietism, that's communism, that's Marxism under a different name. It's wealth redistribution. And not only that, it's antithetical to the Western tradition and Western civilization, because Western civilization at its core is meant to be a merit-based society where...
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, we're going to do the merit argument again. Sir, they've banned in the merit argument way before we got here. They abandoned that. For you to have a merit-based society, you have to be creators. We don't create. We haven't created for a long while. That's why y'all don't like people on social media. Those are probably the last creators we've had. That's why you always want to downplay them, because they're doing something you can't, and they're getting paid for it. The merit model is dead in this country. From private business to public sectors, to even the public-private sectors, like the NBA and the NFL. When you started giving people money for no reason, based on perception, yeah, you killed the merit. Y'all don't want merit. You want upward mobility. Oh, you conservatives love talking about merit. Then since we're going to talk about merit with you conservatives, 99% of y'all shouldn't be where you are, because that's not merit. You've created nothing. You're a bunch of liberals.
Where if a man does not work, he does not eat. Where again, and so the reality of it the reality of it is, to the extent that we get the so-called expert class and the bureaucracy involved, pretending that people are inanimate objects whose society must be ordered and structured for because they're too inept to take care of themselves, we're asking for trouble. We're asking for an ensuing doom. And so what did Booker T. Washington do? He said, yes, because let's recontextualize history just real quick. We had a civil war, the war between the states, really the war of northern aggression.
The war of northern aggression? You're calling the Civil War the war of northern aggression?
Absolutely. So we had the war of northern aggression that took place in this country.
Okay.
We had immediately after something called Reconstruction. We had the carpetbaggers and the scallywags who were basically making life in the South miserable. This is what was actually happening. Okay. And the reality of it is you had, in spite of all that, you had this upward trajectory that was taking place in many different ways, but also you had this friction that was brewing through agitation and propaganda, because that's always been the Marxist way: agitation and propaganda, right?
Without the atheist underpinning foundation, by the way, which doesn't have any belief in objective morality.
The idea is to breed friction. That's what they were trying to do. This is what they were. And so whenever Booker T. Washington would come along, what they were trying to do is they were trying to figure out a way to mitigate all of the friction, all of the turmoil, all of the animosity, because you have to understand, during the Civil War, you had the loss of fathers and brothers and husbands and so on and so forth.
Because black folks got tired of being chains.
So naturally, there's a lot of friction there. And there's a lot of nuance to this, a lot of complexity to this, but there's friction. How must you navigate this friction in order to bring about some degree of peace in society.
Somebody gonna have to
and
be
so
unhappy.
and so I researched this. Manning Johnson even talked about this in the speech that I mentioned earlier. It's called his farewell address. Anyone can look it up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And says he, and I agree, that you had something called interracial commissions that began to spring up across the South. These weren't commissioned by the government, or these were responsible Negro and white leaders and communities coming together, especially in the aftermath of Separate but Equal, trying to figure out, okay, how can we best navigate this thing? And when Booker T. Washington delivered a speech in Atlanta, he said famously, "Cast down your bucket where you are." Rather than going to the government, or rather than engaging in protest and uprising and all the things, no, cast down your bucket where you are.
But
God gave you a mind, He gave you limbs, He gave you the means to be resourceful, to form families, to do all the things. Cast down your bucket where you are. As a result of the things that Booker T. Washington was talking about,
Twisted,
and others who are part of that contingent, you saw this upward trajectory. You saw actual fruit being yielded from the kinds of things that Booker T. Washington was doing. And so when we look at that, that has tangible results, that has tangible effects and impacts. This is progress by reformation. Reformation is slower, it's harder work, but there's a character building component when one is being reformative in that way.
You can have
revolution.
You can have all the character in the
revolution.
world,
Revolution is completely different. Revolution requires no character. It exploits people's vices and people's impatience and all the things.
Boom. There it is. That's one of the parts I wanted you to hear. Revolution takes no character. He just shitted on the forefathers. He shitted on all the people, including the black soldiers that made it possible for his bitch ass to be here and exist in this country. They didn't throw his ass into the lake with the alligators. He just did that. It took no character. Cool. It took no character. And let's deface and get rid of Mount Rushmore. They don't deserve it. I tell you, they dumb. I tell you, they dumb. And he said, and look at his face. He's saying it with such conviction, like he's saying something impressive. Let's just end it with this.
In your mind, you haven't.
No, in the real world, you have to understand Dr. King's legacy. The historical record, Chad, speaks for myself. If I'm not applying the gospel correctly, then explain how we were able to stand and face fire hoses and police dogs and not fight back. What that did was expose the lack of moral defense for the things that the white man was doing to us.
No.
It exposed the weakness of the kind of bigoted mindset that enabled white people to be aggressive with us in the first place.
Okay, so let's recontextualize even that. The use of dogs and hoses was not something that was, and I don't hear you making this claim, but since you brought it up, the use of dogs and hoses was not something that was specifically targeted to Negroes in this country. The reality of it is you can see dogs and hoses that are being used on all unlawful gatherings dating as far back as the 1920s and 30s.
That has nothing to do with what I just said.
Let me make this point though. So the fact is the communists, Marxists, Soviets.
And by the way, are we really saying that? Hold on, we have to go back. Are we really saying? Hold on, we have to go back. Are we really saying that it's all right? But hold on, are we saying that it's all right to unleash dogs and fire hoses on peaceful protesters, regardless of color?
Peaceful protesters. Okay, so you're using leftist language, but yet you swore up and down that you were Mr. Conservative earlier. Let me finish my point here.
If someone's not being aggressive, that's not leftist. That's truth telling. Again, objective video. We have video evidence.
They're being unlawful. They were being unlawful.
They were breaking an unjust law, and unjust law is no law at all.
Okay, so you're quoting King again. But listen, the reality of it is...
quote the truth. If you happen to tell it, why not?
Okay, if King is truth and he's not, then that's fine. But the reality of it is the use of dogs, hoses, and these other crowd disbursement measures were used for quite a while in this country for the better part of the 20th century, which precedes King. These were methods that were used for entirely white, and in some cases predominantly white, labor unions and other such organizations, to the extent that they would unlawfully protests, and they called it nonviolence, but that was part of their tactic. That was part of their agenda, because what they were relying upon is the use of the media to frame it as, oh, these are people who are just peacefully gathering, not realizing that what they were actually doing was gaslighting the public.
So was the March on Washington unlawful when the president?
They were
of the United
gaslighting.
States,
They were gaslighting the
was
public.
the March on Washington unlawful when the president of the United States and others met with the civil? Was that unlawful? The single greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of this country, was that unlawful?
I want to make my point. So
without answering the question,
I want to make my point.
Right.
I'm building to your question, because the thing is, like, we can easily take things out of context.
No, you said that the peaceful protesters were being unlawful.
I'm building, Austin. I'm building to your point, but I'm contextualizing it. So if you'll allow me, the reality of it is, again, it's unlawful insofar that, yes, we have a First Amendment right to the freedom of speech. That's on the books. I see that. But we are also a country of law and order, which means that we have to have some kind of structure and stability in the country. And there is a peaceful and a lawful way to protest and to demonstrate, which requires pulling permits and things of this nature, because you still have to account for noise, you have to account for traffic, you have to account for a whole bevy of different things. This is why, hold on, because King
pull permits when you're fighting against a racist system that won't even give you damn land.
If you'll allow me. So King and his contingent, they would conveniently pull permits in these racist, hostile parts of the South when it was politically feasible for them to do so, but they would not pull it in certain other circumstances, so they can get the photogenic kind of moment that would be plastered on the front pages of newspapers and so on and so forth. That was part of this tactic, that was part of their structure. They understood that to the extent that people are marching and parading and protesting in the streets without having pulled their permits, step one would be for the law enforcement to arrest them or to fine them or what have you. To the extent that the jail would fill up, that was when they would implement crowd disbursement tactics to, as it pertains to dogs and hoses and things of this nature.
So unleash fire hoses on women and children and college students. That's justifiable to you.
So again,
because yes or no,
we are a country of law and order.
But you have to say yes or no.
Yes, I mean, but the thing
so
is,
it's all right. So y'all heard that on the record. We have a yes from Chad
Yes.
Jackson that it is all right. It was all right and justifiable to have Bull Connor tell them send the dogs forth and unleash fire hoses on peaceful protesters, which a large percentage of them were college students, around 18 to 23, women and kids.
So, and sometimes kids as young as 6, according to James Bevel, who said that they specifically went after kids because kids were susceptible. This is what James Bevel said. But the reality of it is,
and that makes it right to you.
So the reality of it is, King was asked by a reporter, don't you? What do you think about the fact? Don't you have any kind of moral pushback about the fact that you are, going after children? You're sending children into these situations where you're not pulling permits, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. You're basically being an agitator. To where King's response was, sometimes you have to do these things to bring the evil out. That was just a fancy way of saying that we're going to gaslight the public until we get what we want.
Is it gaslight the public, or is it draw attention to the fact that those of our white brothers and sisters that were afflicted with the disease of racism would do something as evil and heinous as the harm?
So you're saying, so what is racism? A white business owner not giving you a cup of coffee or a hamburger? That's racism.
If it's based on the color of my skin.
So that's worth taking your 6-year-old and putting them on the streets and knowing that they're not pulling. In fact, a lot of the parents, didn't want their kids participating in this nonsense.
If I have a chance
at all,
if I have a chance to combat an injustice, whatever the risk might be, I'd be willing to take it.
That's a waste of time.
No, it's not.
It is a waste of time.
Well, the Civil Rights Act.
Oh, it's a waste of time to go after injustices. Okay, so then you should be very vocal. Let's check the Twitter real fast, because since he said that doing all that is a waste of time, right? Well, I don't see you talking about I don't see you talking about stopping, people attacking us. I don't see it. I just want y'all to hear what he said again before we cook him and get out of here, because he's boring me.
A lot of the parents,
if I have a chance,
didn't want their kids participating in this nonsense.
If I have a chance
at all,
if I have a chance to combat an injustice, whatever the risk might be, I'd be willing to take it.
That's a waste of time.
No, it's not.
It is a waste of time.
Well, the Civil Rights Act.
A waste of time to go fight injustice. That's what he said. A waste of time. Okay. But you're out here putting up posts trying to fight the supposed injustice. Yeah. Your whole brand, fam, his whole brand is set up to dispel an injustice that America's lied about MLK. Then he tells this lie. This is exhibit A of why I will never run for public office. Sir, you literally ran for public office in Texas. And y'all taking this man serious. Okay. They're still telling that to go. Okay. I'm about done, bro. I'm done. According to him, we're not supposed to go fight for injustice. We're supposed to just allow people to fuck with us. Okay, again, y'all J6s, he said what y'all did was a waste of time. So handle that. Anyway, y'all, I'm going to get up out of here. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, I done my job. If not, I try to be better next time. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Whatever. You know what to do. Y'all take care, stay safe, and you know what to do when the agents of chaos come to mess up your existence.
Oh, here it goes!
Time's up.
Get your ass up! We gotta get out of here now!
But did we have a good time here? Hello?
Gotta get your groove on!
At the end of the day gotta end.
That's it.